Hey everyone, this is Andy Dowling from the Australian metal band LORD and host of the Andy Social Podcast. This is my nod to the old school. This podcast series is all about the old school mixtape and compilation, where I get to talk to some of the best in the business about their first introductions to heavy music and what were on those early mixtapes. My nod to the old school is brought to you by LORD's brand new album, Fallen Idols, available right now through Dominance Records and lord.net.au. For us, Fallen Idols was inspired by that old school mixtape, and whether you love thrash metal, power metal, melodic death, black and thrash, or even a bit of AOR, Fallen Idols is the ultimate metal mixtape that throws back to the nostalgic past of when we all discovered heavy music, but accompanied by a fresh, modern, world-class production. Here's a quick clip from track 7 of Fallen Idols called Counting Down the Hours. Here we go. Episode 7 of My Nod to the Old School is with Johnny D. Now, Johnny is best known as the drummer in Doro, as well as Britny and previously playing in the band Waysted. He is filled with stories from over the years, and in this chat shares some crackers, including taping live concerts off the radio for his first ever mixtapes, taking boomboxes into stadiums to record bootlegs of Journey or the Rolling Stones or other bands, getting picked on as a kid for listening to Kiss of all bands. There's heaps of great stories in this chat, and if you love this, please go and listen to episode 100 of the Andy Social Podcast, where we really dig in deeper and talk for longer about Johnny's childhood, growing up, getting into Britny, getting signed to a major label, playing Tokyo Dome with Bon Jovi, and much more. So go and check all that out over at andysocial.net. I will put links to everything that Johnny's involved with, including Doro, Britny, and himself, over in the show notes over at lord.net.au, as well as andydowling.net. Here we go. Episode 7, Johnny D.
It's weird. I guess, I don't know if it's the age thing or not, but I think it started later for me. I mean, in the beginning, not so much. I was never one of these mixtape aficionados, and sending them to chicks or whatever, as sort of ways to get in or, but I mean, it kind of, man, I remember actually having 8-track mixes, which was like, I think even preceding cassettes when I was a kid. I had a stereo which had an 8-track player that you could also record on. So I had a bunch of 8-tracks which were useful but kind of useless at the same time, you know what I mean? They were really kind of stupid in the way that you had to change tracks and cut off music as you were doing so, and but you use what you have to at the time. But later on, when the cassettes kind of kicked in, that was a whole different thing. I mean, I did have mixtapes which had either favorite records on them in full or just stuff you borrowed from other people, or I think a lot of times I would record live concerts from the radio, just whatever heavy stuff was out at the time. And I just remember like Ozzy, and I had some Zeppelin bootlegs and just different, everything you could get your hands on, or even we were trading LPs, and a buddy of mine was getting a lot of imports. I guess, he had probably more money than I did, so he was buying a lot of vinyls on import and turning me on to a lot of stuff from England and from other places in the world, which were, you know, either cool records that weren't out in the States or, you know, stuff with B-sides that were, you know, impossible to find anywhere else. So I would always, you know, create some mixtapes with those tracks and just really, you know, it was real easy to jump in the car and throw the tape in and just be gone for hours and not have to be, you know, stuck in your room listening to vinyl or whatever. I mean, there's a, you know, I think they definitely had their place for, you know, for the time, and really convenient and just awesome because you could pretty much put everything, you could pull all the tracks from a record that you really want to hear and throw them on. But yeah, I remember so much stuff that I think specifically, I remember, I think it was like an Ozzy. This guy I knew, Steve, he had the Blizzard of Oz record on import in the States before it had even come out there.
Oh, wow.
And we just, that blew our fucking minds because we, you know, we hadn't, you know, we didn't even know Ozzy had a new band, let alone have heard like the stuff that was coming out of the speaker. So I remember that being a real impression when I finally got to borrow that from him and make a tape of it. And sure, man, just what came after that was just unbelievable, you know, because it was, we were kind of feeling like we had a clue to it before anybody else even knew. And we ended up seeing that tour with Randy Rhoads at the Tower Theater in Philly because, I mean, that was the first time they had played in the States. And I don't think anybody, I mean, it was a good crowd, but I don't think everybody knew, you know, until later that Ozzy was back with a vengeance, if you will, or whatever, stuff like that, that all kind of, you know, throws me back to those days. But yeah, so many bands, so many songs, so many tapes. I think I still have all my cassettes in storage somewhere.
Yeah, wow.
Which is pretty wild.
They've managed to stand the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have some stuff on cassette that I don't have in any other format that probably would be pretty hard to find now, you know, so I should get back in there and check it out if they're not all moldy and destroyed by now, but you never know.
With you sort of when you're getting these you know, early copies of albums and, you know, friends are getting access to this stuff that a lot of other people wouldn't have access to yet, and you're making these tapes yourself. I mean, was there a bit of a fine art to dubbing it onto cassette from vinyl, or if you're doing a mixtape with a bunch of different songs, not just recording straight off the album? I mean, just making sure that you're getting those clean cuts and making sure that you're able to get into the next song. Was there a bit of a fine art involved with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, pretty much had to try to time out a side as best you could, you know, without wasting a whole, you know, tune that might get cut off at the end, or, you know, you don't want any of those abrupt starts or ends and you're checking the meters and doing, you know, it's definitely a lot of work, you know, but it was a labor of love, I think, to do that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, definitely a fine art if you know, break it down into those terms. You know, you could sit there for an hour and just try to find the songs that fit, you know, time wise, get them all on the first side and then do the next thing. Or you could just kind of wing it and go for it and end up at the end with like 2 minutes left and just go, okay, I need a 2-minute blaster, you know, let's finish this thing out. And many times you get frustrated because you kind of go back and start over again, but it was all part of the fun of it.
Did those early mixtapes, I mean, you sort of mentioned it before, but was it more of a case of sort of a mix of heavier music, or was it like, I mean, these days you got so many different subgenres of rock and metal that you know, people tend to niche, or in your in your words, niche down to a particular slice of that genre that they like and nothing else. But I mean, years and years ago, it probably wouldn't have had that many distinctions as far as the different genres available. It's more of a case of probably heavy guitars,
Yeah.
and that's about it. I mean, what sort of mix did you have as far as those songs that you were putting on those early mixtapes?
Well, for me in that time, I was, just into what is now called classic rock. But like you said, there was no real definition of heavy to, even some of the more popular bands or lighter bands that had some heavy guitar, like you said, and stuff like that all kind of fit in. And I was never one to, when I was probably 13, Kiss was almost uncool, and this was like around the time of Alive. I mean, there were teenagers older than me telling me that, dude, Kiss sucks, anymore. They sold out and all. And I'm like, what? Like, I just discovered this band, and they're like the craziest, scariest, most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And then I got these older dudes kind of calling me a wimp because I'm listening to Kiss, and it was just so bizarre. But
what were they listening to?
Probably Sabbath, and just getting completely stoned and, tripping out on Pink Floyd and all the shit that I kind of got into later, all the heavier and more obscure stuff. But, you got to start somewhere, and that was kind of where it was. But then there was other bands, I would either catch bands at a in a support slot. I remember I saw, even the band Angel, for example, they weren't really as big as Kiss, although some people kind of made them out to be heading in that direction. But they were a band that I loved simply because, I saw their record in a store one day and took a chance on it, and absolutely blew me away. But when I saw them live, I saw them with this band, The Gods, from Ohio, and they were killer, man. They were heavy, just kind of punky and just raw and dirty biker-looking guys. So, there was a lot of obscure bands that you got turned on to. And then I, in turn, made, some tapes for some friends and tried to turn them on to what I was listening to. So, but back at that time, it went from, Sabbath and Alice Cooper, who was kind of really, shocking and heavy and scary at the time, and Motorhead and all the kind of stuff that was considered on the hard edge before even thrash came out, But then you mix in a band like Blue Oyster Cult that has really dark kind of, mysterious kind of tunes, and they also have like totally commercial song like Don't Fear the Reaper or something. But I was listening to prog, heavy metal, just pop rock, bands like Kansas, along with Sabbath, Ted Nugent, Heart, like Blue Oyster Cult, and then it sort of spun into Rush and, and mixed in with AC/DC and all the other, what we call classic now, and all the, the obvious stuff, Thin Lizzy, I mean, all these bands. So to me, it wasn't just one genre, even though now it kind of looks that way. But back then, as you said, it was, there was no dividing lines. It was just kind of all rock, It
would have been an exciting time around then because, obviously, personally, it's, it's great music and those bands are incredible. But even just sort of being a younger person and sort of discovering music and sort of not knowing, the etiquette when it comes to liking particular bands or what's cool and what's not. It's a case of just going, oh my God, I'm just absorbing so much great music here from all these different bands and just discovering as you go. That would have been really exciting.
It was super exciting. I guess every generation looks back in that sense to, what they were growing up with and how much better it was. And, I hate to even say that sometimes, but you can't deny what went down, you know, in the 70s when I was growing up, you know, because it's kind of lasted to this day. And many people say that about the 60s or whatever, you know, era, even the 80s. I mean, a lot of that stuff is still, you know, if you look at bands like Motley Crue and whatever, you know, bigger, as big now as they were then, and still, you know, endeared in every fan's heart. And but it was super exciting because you were just, I mean, it was almost like everything was great. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say that, but unless you drew the line at like, okay, everything that rocks, it just totally kicks ass. But if you listen to the Bee Gees or some kind of, because I went through the whole disco sucks era, you know, I was a kid, teenager when that stuff was going down, you know, so it was like anything that rocks just kicks everything else's ass, you know, so don't even try it. So, you know, you would get like physical with people, you know, that disco heads or whatever, and you would, you know, it made you even fight for your music even more, you know, grow your hair longer, wear fucking crazy clothes, or just do, you know, crank your stereo even louder. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, I might have mentioned it to you, but we would do, this is even like concert security. I was thinking about how lax it was back then. Like, we actually, when we went through the first era of the boom box, speaking of cassettes again, you know, these boom boxes were like packed with speakers, serious power, double cassette decks. You know, you could record on them, you could play whatever you wanted to. I mean, we actually walked into a stadium concert with a boom box and just sat there and like hit record, and we would have bootlegs of these concerts with ourselves yelling in the, you know, into the, yeah, dude, you know, so they're hardly listenable. But I mean, it's like amazing that you think you could walk in with a giant radio, like, yeah, dude, you know, I think it was the Stones at JFK Stadium or something in Philly, also a giant Journey concert. And I think one of my friends still to this day has that tape somewhere, which is totally awesome, man. When I think of those days and the shit you could get away with, it was just, like you said, man, it was an amazing time, man, just to, you know, to experience all that music.
That's incredible, especially given the era that we live in now, and everything's pat down and everything's checked before you get in, and just to you can lug in a boombox and just sit it down and
Oh, it was
press record.
ridiculous.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Right. I know. Now you got like all this stuff at your fingertip on your phone in your pocket, you know, but back then it was just, like you said, a fine art to, you know, to not only listening to music, but making those mixtapes or making, you know, whatever kind of personality or personal versions of what you wanted to hear while you were doing your thing. You know, I remember also skateboarding was a big thing for us when I was, you know, 12 or so, and just being a complete, you know, suburban punk and just being a stupid little, you know, white kid running around skateboarding and breaking windows and doing stupid shit. But I remember having like the first Van Halen album, just completely ripping loud on these boom boxes and just skateboarding at a skateboard park, or just like, you know, terrorizing the neighborhood or whatever. And I mean, we walked down the street with music so loud. It was just unbelievable how we got away with everything, you know. And now you couldn't probably, you know, probably get arrested or fined for having like a volume, you know, discrepancy or some kind of, you know,
being a public nuisance.
I don't know. Totally, yeah. I mean, you just, but yeah, it brings back a ton of memories, man. Awesome stuff.
I mean, one thing just off that, because I was in New York earlier this year, and it's so stereotypical of New York for any foreigner, but I even came across people walking down the street still with, these retro boom boxes blasting music so obnoxiously to everybody around them. And you just think, who are these people and why do they think they're the only person in the world and everybody else wants to listen to this music? But I mean, back then, you know, Walkmans, I mean, I was talking to Willie G, who has been Megadeth's guitar tech for so many years, years and years ago, and
Yeah.
he was talking about Walkmans being so expensive, and so it took a long time to get money up for a Walkman. So was it a case that if you were out and about, you would take your boombox a lot of the time, or were sort of Walkmans sort of something that you had as well as a kid, or what was the sort of deal when you went public?
Well, I went both. I kind of went through one era into the next. I mean, it's been, I was born in '63. So, like I said earlier, by the time I hit like 10 and started to really be, get into music and just be a pain in everybody's ass. I mean, I remember carrying around, I also had a small, wasn't really a boom box, but I guess we had these like cheesy 8-track players that were like had a handle and just like you pop the 8-track in and they had a single speaker and it was just like you're mobile, man. You know what I mean? Like even for like kids that are like 7, 8 years old, they're going around like all their music going. And so we had those. And then, the ridiculous boombox era started, and then it was muscle cars with like the most ridiculous stereos inside them with like watts and watts of power that you could literally like shatter the windows with, and just, people just screaming down the streets and stuff. But for me, yeah, it was kind of every technology that came along, we kind of jumped on, and I remember the Walkman era, and then everybody kind of went sort of, into your own little world, and kind of stopped forcing stuff on people and going more like cerebral in your own head. And I think that's where we are now. I mean, it's like I see people with like over the ear earphones, not just earbuds, but like, and I'm thinking, like, how do these people not get run over by a tractor trailer or something? Like, everybody's just, like, walking down the street and, completely oblivious to whatever, at least when we were doing the crazy shit we did. I mean, we were kind of thinking that we were, sharing with the public or whatever. Listen to this Van Halen, man. And then all the neighborhood is like, oh, my God. But, yeah, Walkmans, when they were affordable, was definitely like that was a whole different thing, because then cassettes really, I think, came into their own, because not only were they selling, pre-made cassettes, pre-recorded, but they also had improved the quality of blank cassette tapes so much that now you could get great quality on your mixtapes and home recordings. So really the possibilities were endless, and then you just pop them in your Walkman and you're golden.
Oh man, a big nostalgia trip then. That was fantastic. I love it. To learn more about our guests, check out the show notes over at andydowling.net as well as lord.net.au, where you can hear our brand new album, Fallen Idols. Cheers for listening, and this has been my nod to the old school. Larry, please.